The Washington football team is no longer known by the name for which it was known for 87 years. It is currently known by no name other than the Washington football team. The franchise apparently threw its hands in the air yesterday, Charean, and said, we can't dot the I's, we can't cross the T's. Most importantly, we can't get the appropriate federal trademark protections in place so we can sell merchandise with the new name on it. So we're going to wait to have a new name, and we're going to play a season, at least a season, with no name at all. Washington football team. Logos removed from the helmet. Washington placed under the NFL shield on the front of the jersey. The uniforms look good. They've got the gold version of the number on the side of the helmet so they wouldn't look like Alabama. I kind of like what it looks like. I don't like the fact that they were sufficiently dysfunctional, shockingly, to not get a new name in place before the start of the season.
It has to be the first time in history, Mike, that the NHL has won up the NFL. But they did that yesterday, and their timing was impeccable with the naming of the new Seattle franchise, the Kraken. And I think they got a lot of publicity out of that. You know, the marketing director, who is new, a week or two into the job, said that, these things take 12 to 18 months. Seattle took 2 years to do their name. They went through over 1,000 names. They vetted 100 names, seriously considered 100 names, looked at polls, looked online. I would have been more surprised, I think, if they had got it done before the start of the season based on where we have come from. I mean, they just announced at the beginning of the month that they were going to do away with the name. 10 days ago, they said, we're definitely not going to have it for this year. And now all of a sudden, they're supposed to have a new name when they don't have trademark protections, all that stuff. It was really quick. I would have been more surprised if they had gotten it done before the season. They need time to do this, and they're going to have now a year. They need to roll it out next spring for sure.
We were on hiatus when this all came up, and last week I remember seeing in the Washington Post the first story hinting at how long it takes to rebrand a sports team because of all of the things you have to do. And that's fine. Charean, everything you said is perfectly reasonable. My position on that is this is part of the debt you accrue when you say in May of 2013 you're never changing the name, put it in all caps, and you don't plan for what is an inevitability. If you don't have the foresight to realize that your decision as the owner of the team to dig in your feet and pout and have a tantrum and refuse to consider that at some point, you're going to have to change that name. At some point during your tenure as owner of the team, you're going to have to change that name. You better have something ready in your back pocket for when your front pockets are emptied. That's why I have no sympathy for Daniel Snyder here. And look, he thought as of a couple of weeks ago when they said, when everyone expected that there would be new name out or old name out and new name in, that they're going to keep the old name until they have a new name. They expected to have a new name. Like, even when it comes to the realities of rebranding an NFL franchise, there was a level of defiance and stubbornness from Daniel Snyder. He should have just acknowledged from the get-go. It should have been the plan from the start that we're going to go with this placeholder of Washington football team, and it isn't going to be a short process, and it is going to take a year to a year and a half. And it's almost like the owner had to come to that conclusion on his own before they could make it official, which maybe it should have been. Look, I mean, there's all sorts of failures here. Are we surprised that a team that has been so dysfunctional for the last 2 decades could screw this up? They didn't see it coming, and when it was thrust upon them, they didn't realize that it wasn't something they would be able to quickly do. And now, 3 weeks in, they finally cry uncle and say, we can't come up with a new name this quickly. Maybe they should have never even tried to.
Well, Mike, hashtag HTTWFT doesn't have the same ring to it. And a friend of mine is a fan of the team, and she reversed those last letters. You have to be careful saying those last letters, but she reversed those letters. But let's go back to when I was last on the show, which was, 6 weeks ago, 2 months ago, whatever it was. And you were the first one saying, look, this has to change. And I said, yes, I agree, but you're the only one banging this drum. And it was a very soft drum at that time, Mike. You started banging it, and it got louder and louder and louder. And once the sponsor said, we're out. You've got to change this name. That's when it all happened. The voices all came together. But we could all see this coming, I think, when you first started this chorus a couple months ago, and now it's happened. But you're right. He should have known that this was going to come at some point. This was going to happen. At least start getting quietly get some trademarks of other things you think you might want to change it to. What does that hurt to have those? It doesn't cost you very much money. You have them, and then if it happens, you're ready to go if it does happen.
And, that's an excellent point, because once it became inevitable that they were changing the name, I started to research the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office's free database. It's out there for anyone. It takes some work finding it and figuring out how to actually do the search, but it's not all that complicated, as evidenced by the fact that I figured it out. But this guy, Martin McCauley, who's made a hobby out of squatting on potential team names for the Washington franchise for years, the moment that it was announced that the team would be conducting a thorough review of the name back on July the 3rd, he started loading up the cannon with more of these names where he squats on the trademark rights. And it shouldn't be, it shouldn't be that hard. If the name they want is one of the names that Martin McCauley has, it shouldn't be that hard. He's made it clear that he doesn't want anything. Now, he said more recently he wants a scholarship to be funded for Native American students. I mean, you have to engage the guy to find out what he really wants, and I've gotten the impression they refuse to engage him. There's just been this stubbornness, intransigence, defiance that characterizes everything Daniel Snyder does, and this is what happens when it unfolds in this context. It ends up being this slippery, elusive, what in the hell are you people trying to do, because you're not doing anything that you need to be doing to lay the foundation to change the name. So I'm not surprised by anything that's happened, Charean. I just have no sympathy for Daniel Snyder that he's found himself in this weird box where he says he's going to conduct a thorough review of the name. He says he's going to get rid of the current name and replace it simultaneously with a new name, and then eventually has to say, this isn't going to work. We're just going to go with this placeholder Washington football team. Please buy our merchandise for the Washington football team, but just for this year. By next year, we'll have more merchandise that you can buy.
Well, and that's the thing. They will sell more merchandise, because they're going to sell merchandise this year because a lot of people like the look of what it is, and they have kept the colors, and then they'll sell more merchandise even next year. So that could have played a part in it too. This could be a money-making opportunity for the franchise. But it is not surprising that this is where this franchise is for sure. And I'll say this, and you can kind of tack onto this, Mike, whether you think that coming out with a name now would have been a positive, maybe to bury some of all the negative that we've heard from this franchise, or is now the wrong time to do this because of all the negativity associated with this franchise. I would say, it would bury some of the negativity, because we would be talking about the name, although we're talking about the name anyway, and we've put some of the other stuff aside just because we're sitting here talking about the name. But there has been so much negativity associated with this franchise.
That's a great point, and here's the thing. If you pick the right name, it definitely goes a long way toward turning the page. They're trying so desperately to turn the page on a history of dysfunction, on a bad culture that somehow Daniel Snyder bears no responsibility for. That inevitably will be the result of the investigation conducted by the lawyer whose check Daniel Snyder will be signing. But I have no faith in a Daniel Snyder-led organization to pick the right name. See, if they actually, there's a little kernel of wisdom in the decision to just punt until next year, or maybe even longer, because chances are if they had picked a name now, it wouldn't have been a good name. So let's stop. Let's wait. Let's hang on here before we do something rash that may only make things worse. Let's wait to pick a name. So in a very reluctant way, I'm going to give a Daniel Snyder-led organization some credit for recognizing, yes, they could have found a way to make things worse.
Hi, I'm Mike Tirico, and thanks for watching. Make sure to hit subscribe for the latest news and highlights from NBC Sports.